Hi, the watch of the week this week belongs to Rick. It's a brand new, beautiful Omega Seamaster Professional Planet Ocean. I've always liked this watch. From the first time I saw it, I was considering it for one of the GMTs I was looking for. And Rick is relatively new to horology. And in fact, this was the first watch he bought that he even considers to be part of worthy of a collection. But we all got to get started. Actually, Rick's got a couple other watches that aren't that bad, a Movado, and he has an Echo Drive on a Citizen. That Echo Drive has got some interesting things about it, so no reason to be embarrassed by that. But anyway, here it is, the Seamaster. You can see the movement in the back. It's a in-house movement, and it's a really very, very nice watch. And I'm especially happy to have someone who's new at this insanity. So welcome, Rick, and congratulations on having the watch of the week. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Sanders, and this is WatchArtSci, the art and science of watch collection. Today is the day before Hanukkah, so for those of you who celebrate Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah. Sunday is Christmas, so Merry Christmas for those who celebrate Christmas. And for those of you who could care less, but just like all the parties, happy seasons. Okay, today what we're going to do, we're going to do something that's very difficult, and it's something that I need your help on. And it's setting up a good ranking system for watches. This doesn't mean that we're looking for something to be exclusionary, but rather to include watches in categories that will help us make decisions. For example, if you want high horology, we need to know which watches are true high horology. Now, if you go down and you pay $10,000, $15,000 for a watch, it's a gorgeous watch with a cheap movement in it that has no horology at all, you should know about that, and so decide whether that's what you really want to do. Maybe the watch you're getting is because all your friends have one, and so you get one too, just like it. But this is in part too for having us all think about the watches that we get and what we're paying for, because we're paying a lot. The prices of watches have gotten crazy. And some of the watches, at least from what I've seen, they don't cost that much to make relative to what the very best do. So what I thought we'd do is that what I would do, and then we'll talk about it in our discussion section, is to come up with a list of things in an order that will set up, let's say, it'll be a hierarchy of value. And what I did, I came up with 7 things. Now, before I did this, I went out and I looked at their numerous watch rankings. There's this one place that's called WatchRankings.com, and it describes itself as the definitive watch ranker. There are several other ones too. The Watch Enthusiasts have one you subscribe to for pay. Let me see. There are several of them. Anyway, I went through them and looked at it not as a collector, but as a researcher, because that's what I know. That's my background. And when you do research, one of the first things you have to do is to set up categories of what you're counting or what you're looking at or what you're making some kind of rating on. And before you do that, you have to really think about it. And this is what I'm going to ask you to help me do. I mean, what all of you have experience with watches. And At least I hope so. And so let's take a look at what I consider the 7 things that I think are most important in terms of the value of a watch. Okay, the very first thing I think of or consider to be is craftsmanship, and craftsmanship is had to do with how well the watch is built. We'll take a look at each one of these in turn. The second is innovation. It's same old, or trying out different things. Uh, the third is has to do with the movement, whether it's in-house or a cheap one that was bought. There's another category I don't think that has been discussed too much, and that's called premium. Uh, Premium movements, and Alan Hoare is one, and Vasseur is another that make really very good movements, and so it's something we have to consider. In fact, Auchencourt has won probably as many Grand Prix, or at least the watches that with their movements as any of the watch companies. Third is our fourth is production. Now this has to do with how the watches are produced. Are they produced by a robot assembly line, or are they produced by hand, or something in between there? Fifth is materials. What materials are used? There's nothing wrong with stainless steel, but stainless steel comes at different qualities of stainless steel, how it's finished, how it's treated, and everything else. And then, of course, there's different levels of precious metal that we're going to take a look at too. 6 is awards. Now, the awards that I'm going to consider, I have been considering, and I haven't let me down yet, are the Grand Prix de Horologie de Genève. Every year, a number of prizes are given out to watches in different categories, and there's a top category, and we'll take a look at it too. The reason for this is that more than any of us, or any of us think, I'll put that too, these are real experts. I mean, these are the best in the world. And if they say something is worthy of an award in competition with other worthy watches, that ought to count for something. And so I count it. And finally is the history, a watch's history, or the history of the brand. I've seen a lot of these rankings put that way up there. I don't. In fact, the history, I think there's short history and there's long history. Short history is pretty much is what have you done for me lately? And by that I'm talking about, let's say the last 40, 50 years. Okay, this is recent history. Then there's ancient history. This goes back to the days when Breguet and Leroy were making watches for kings and queens. Okay, that was then, this is now, so let's take a look at it. Okay, the first category is craftsmanship, and the people like Philippe Dufour, here's his something that he made called the Duality. The craftsmanship into that is just incredible. And Dufour only makes a handful of any of his watches. I think the starting price is about $100,000 roughly, and usually the ones on the used market have gone up significantly. Also has to do with the quality of the movements. Not only do they make them in-house, anybody can make them in-house. The difference, though, between, let's say, an in-house made by Orient Watchmakers, that is a subsidiary of Seiko, have a different level of craftsmanship than those made by Vacheron Constantin, Patek Philippe, A-Long. So there is a difference. Complications. Complications have to do with different kinds of things that a watch can do, from let's say a moon phase in a watch. Those done by uh, Christian Vanderkloss are amazing. Other ones are not so much. Okay, so craftsmanship is something that's important. Attention to detail. This is very important. And this includes things like the finish, how is the movement finished. The the second category, innovation. This has to do more, I think, with movement types. Okay, there's certain movements that the spring unwinds and all of the gears go around. And by the way, too, we're talking about mechanical watches. We're not talking about smart watches. We're not talking about quartz watches. Okay, just for mechanical watches. Um, the most famous innovative movement is the tourbillon because it takes a great deal of skill to make that. It turns out that with watches, it's not any better than fairly standard movements, but that's not the point. The point is it's something innovative, it's something different, something really fun to look at. Other ones, like ones that run on resonance, are just like they run on. I think they're magic. Okay, in-house versus premium. Now, an in-house movement is simply one that's made by the manufacturer. One of the more interesting ones is Mont Blanc. Mont Blanc has more fairly recently begun making in-house ones, but they were working with Vasseur, and then they bought 25% of Vasseur, and I'm not sure how that relationship is working in terms of, do the people at Mont Blanc simply make theirs and the people at Vasseur have nothing to do with it, or was it mutually developed? I'm not sure how that relationship worked, but it's an important relationship. Vasseur is interesting because they do make, they're sort of almost bespoke or on-demand movements for different watch companies. Now their movements, just the movements, go for $1,000 a pop, which means you're not dealing with just any old movement. You're dealing with a seriously good movement. And so we have to consider that versus something that is made in huge masses. We tend to think of ETA, that's only one of them. I think that Salida is another. Soprod isn't making that many yet, but it may, especially if ETA continues with keeping their movements from being available to everybody else. Now, they're not necessarily bad. There's a difference between a mass-produced movement and what we'll call a crafted movement. And there's also movements you have like a robotic assembly line making them. I think Tag Heuer has something like that. They're using nanotechnology and AI and everything else on theirs, and so it's a kind of movement that's not quite the same as a tacky movement. It's certainly in-house, and it actually may have something even better than we can do with our hands. The next one is production. This has to do with everything from what is produced. For example, cases. Bremont makes these incredible cases, but a lot of watch companies don't even make their own cases. How the production works, A. Lange and so on, they have what they call I think they have a second build. They take their watches, build them, test them, then take them apart and put them back together again to make sure they work. That's huge amount of quality that goes into that. So these are things that I think count if they're producing something. Now, Bremont is working into making their own movement in the meantime, and they're making little parts of it. They're doing it slowly. So it's sort of interesting to watch what's going on. The fifth one I mentioned initially is materials. The main materials that we have, you have steel, gold, titanium, tantalum. Tantalum and titanium are different elements. So they're not one's not related to the other, really. platinum, and there's some other things like ceramics that are being used, maybe even plastics and rubber. Well, that perhaps for the straps. Um, One of the most interesting things is Rolex. Rolex has its own foundry. It makes its own materials. It buys the gold and does whatever you have to do to make gold into cases or bezels or whatever else they're making. Okay, this next one is can be problematic for certain reasons, several reasons, and that is with the awards. It's problematic because certain major companies simply decided not to enter their watches anymore. You have Rolex that never did enter, but then they sent in Tudor, and Tudor won some. You have Vacheron Constantin and Patek Philippe, who won a big carload of them, and then decided not to participate anymore. You have FP Zorn, who also won a huge number for. They are amazing stuff that they won for, and the last couple of years I don't think they've entered. So it's sort of a funny thing. There are other awards like the Vacheron Constantin Historiques Americain 1921, won the watch of a year, but is the award itself is are the people giving that award really something? Well, we should look at that award too. So awards I think are important because very, very qualified people are making those decisions rather than just a bunch of knockabout collectors like me. Okay, in history, I mentioned history before. History is very important to a lot of people. Take, for example, here is a El Leroy from right around 2000, and Leroy made the Marie Antoinette's, Napoleon's. I mean, they made the clocks and watches for them. And they have this rich history. Breguet has this incredible history, going through the time that France was going through its revolution and trying to survive that. History, Vacheron Constantin, Patek Philippe, all of these famous people in history have their watches, but the sort of like they say in the movies business, what have you done lately for me? So anyhow, now what I would like to do is to set this up in such a way that I could write a computer program and people could enter in the various characteristics, click a button, and it would come up with something that would put it into one of the rankings. Now, one of the mistakes I think a lot of these rankings have is that they don't, some companies have very high level watches. There are some Rolex watches that are way up above what the general category of Rolex generally falls in. Rolex has been categorized again and again as sort of in the middle. They're below high horology, but above the non-luxury watches. But then they have some ones that go up pretty high. The same thing with Cartier, but I'll say on the other end is that they have some, with the some of their movements, they ones that they make in-house, and some of the watches they make belong much higher, but a lot of them belong in a lower category than the bulk of their watches. And so what I want to do is sort of make something that we can say, all right, well, this is sort of the rank of the brand, but this individual watch is either a superior version of it or not so superior. Okay, now, I need your help because I think that all of us have something we can add to this. So in the comments section, say, hey, this is what I think. Here's my watch, and this is a great watch. Not so much. What I want you to do is say, look, how valuable is each of these categories as far as you're concerned? Now, as a collector, you're at a collector meeting and you see somebody else's watch and you say, wow, that's really a great watch. Or you say, I wonder why they're collecting those watches. So let's try to do this as honest as possible. It's difficult for me to do because there are watches I just think these are the greatest watches in the world, and I think they ought to belong really high. Maybe I'm wrong. Or there's some watches that aren't as high as I think they should be, and they're much higher. Then there are watches like Leroy, and now called Leroy. They're in a transition. They've been bought and sold so many times that it's difficult to really say. Their most recent movements, they have a new Inhouse movement. They went to Vasseur. They had this one has a Pazou in it, a Pazou movement. They're going through transition. So I think that one category that we should have is sort of a sad category called a transition. It's sort of like a purgatory that they'll stay there until we can figure something out. But like I said, the important thing, your comments from you. Please have your comments. Okay, now when we had a group project before, what I asked you to do, and I'll ask you to do it again, I don't like e-begging, I don't do it. But we have these little buttons, and if you think it's worthwhile participating in this, click on the like button. That this will help us all come up with something. So yeah, it maybe we're not talking so much about an up and down hierarchy as we are a horizontal one. These are different categories of things that people want to participate in. Need to hear from you. Be sure to leave a comment. Subscribe. This would be a great time to subscribe if you're thinking about it. Start off 2017 in the right foot. Okay, this has been Bill Sanders, WatchArtSci, the art and science of watch collection. We'll see you on Sunday with another collection review. Take care.